The Mafia never fades, it only evolves. Power shifts, alliances crumble, and blood is spilled, but the game never ends. No matter how many fall, new players rise to take their place. It's a world ruled by violence, money, and loyalty, where trust is fragile, betrayal is inevitable, and once you're in, there's no way out. The young ones rise fast, hungry for control, ruthless in their ambition. They strike hard, making their mark with fear and force. The old ones, they either die as legends, disappear into the shadows, or become prisoners of their own power, paranoid, isolated, and always watching their backs. Yet some never step away. They adapt, outlast, and tighten their grip on an empire built on fear and fortune. These are the top, youngest mafia bosses still calling the shots today. Born into the life of luxury, son of a mafioso locked away for life. But Nicchi wasn't just another heir to the underworld, he was something different. They called him U Picciutello, the little boy, a nickname meant to mock, but soon the laughter faded, because in Cosa Nostra, power is about blood, and Nicchi's hands were already stained with it. His godfather, Antonio Rotolo, saw him as an extension of himself. Power came with lessons. In bugged conversations, police heard Rotolo teaching Nicchi the art of killing. But loyalty in the mafia is always a balancing act. One wrong step and the ones who once swore to protect you will be the ones digging your grave. When Rotolo refused to let the Inzerillo family return to Palermo, he made enemies, and when he was arrested, Nicchi was left in the open, unprotected. The Lo Piccolo family wanted him dead. They sent hitmen after him. He ran and escaped death more times than anyone should, but survival meant something else. It meant power, and when the Lo Piccolos fell, Nicchi rose even higher. By 2008, he was untouchable, a king in the making, but kings don't always get to rule for long. On December 5, 2009, the police finally caught up with him. He was dragged from his hiding place in Palermo, locked away under the strictest prison conditions. But prison doesn't erase a man like Nicchi. Was his story truly over, or was this just another quiet chapter before the blood starts flowing again? Let us know in the comments and hit that subscribe button. In the chaotic world of Canadian organized crime, few names strike as much fear or controversy as David Peak Turmel. At just 27, Turmel is the undisputed leader of the Blood Family Mafia, a street gang with Red 2 allegiance, modeled after the infamous Bloods of Los Angeles. Back in 2014, on the very day he turned 18, Turmel got into an argument at a bar. But instead of throwing punches, he pulled out a knife. 2 men were left bleeding. Turmel was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Jail didn't break him. In 2018, Turmel was arrested again, and in 2019 he was back in prison. But his longest stretch behind bars? 12 months. By 2023, he was a wanted fugitive. But unlike their American counterparts, the BFM has ignited a war that even the most hardened criminals rarely dare to wage, a full-scale rebellion against the Hells Angels. For years, street gangs in Quebec played by the rules. You wanted to sell drugs, you paid your tax to the Hells Angels. But in 2023, Turmel and the BFM did the unthinkable. They refused to pay, and somehow, against all odds, they got away with it. Turmel's defiance of the Hells Angels shocked everyone, and the worst part, the Hells Angels weren't fighting back, at least not in the way they used to. By mid-2024, the underground was changing. For decades, the Hells Angels controlled everything, but now, a younger, more ruthless generation was rising. More and more street-level dealers were siding with Turmel rather than paying the Hells Angels fees. The Hells tried to retaliate, forming baseball teams, but fear of the BFM was growing. Despite his criminal empire, Turmel is a ghost. He fled Canada in July 2023, reportedly hiding out in Lisbon, Portugal. His right-hand man, Rubens Dennis, was arrested in March 2024. Another lieutenant, Guillaume Saint-Louis Bernier, was caught in June 2024 in Kelowna, British Columbia. Bernier had been running from a Canada-wide arrest warrant since March 20th, 2024. Drug trafficking, possession of stolen property, but Turmel remains untouchable. As of today, he's officially one of Quebec's 10 most wanted criminals. The police have issued an international arrest warrant, and authorities are offering $250,000 for any information leading to his capture. In the criminal underworld, Turmel has the biggest bounty in history, a $500,000 contract on his head. The first time Emanuele Sibillo was arrested, he was just 15. The police raided his home in Naples' Forcella district while he was desperately trying to dispose of 2 guns. In and out of prison over the next few years, he quickly distinguished himself from other young inmates. He read books, studied newspapers, and observed how the criminal underworld operated. By the time he turned 18 in 2013, he was ready for the next step: rebellion. His target, the old Camorra clans that had ruled Naples for decades. Since the early 2000s, relentless police crackdowns had decimated the leadership of the Camorra. With many old bosses either dead or imprisoned, a power vacuum emerged, and into that void stepped a new generation, teenagers and young adults eager to seize control. They were known as paranze, a slang term borrowed from small fishing boats but repurposed to mean gangs of young, reckless criminals. Boys as young as 15 or 16 were wielding firearms, racing through Naples' alleyways on scooters, and broadcasting their violent exploits on social media. Sibillo was at the heart of this phenomenon. Unlike the older, secretive mobsters who adhered to the Omerta code of silence, the new generation flaunted their wealth and power online. They posed in designer clothes, popped €200 bottles of champagne, and showed off their weapons. And of course, they killed without hesitation. Sibillo had a plan to unify the scattered, leaderless Camorra clans under his rule. By 2014, at just 18 years old, he was already being called the baby godfather of Forcella. But the Mafia is a world where ambition is deadly. 1 year later, in 2015, Sibillo was dead. A rival clan ambushed him in the streets of Naples, gunning him down in a brutal attack. His reign lasted barely a year. The new generation of crime bosses had risen quickly, but they were also falling just as fast. The sins of the father often cast long shadows, and for Vincent Basciano Jr., stepping out of his father's shadow was no easy task. The 33-year-old son of the infamous Vinny Gorgeous Basciano, the former Bonanno crime family boss, found himself entangled in crime, though not quite as violently as his father. Vincent Jr. was part of a Bronx marijuana trafficking ring, moving around 2 pounds of weed a week to 300 regular customers. It was a family affair. His brothers Stephen and Joseph Basciano also played crucial roles and later pleaded guilty alongside him. Junior's marijuana scheme wasn't the only thing that landed him in handcuffs. Authorities also arrested him for his alleged involvement in a $50 million sports betting ring, stretching from New York to California. Alongside him, authorities nabbed Gadun Spanky Quiroyos, a known gambling ringleader from New Jersey, and 15 other bookmakers accused of taking bets on football, baseball, basketball, and horse racing. Police claimed the ring used offshore gambling websites to avoid law enforcement detection, but the NYPD and FBI weren't fooled. Inspector Brian O'Neill of the NYPD Organized Crime Division confirmed that threats were made to collect money, though no one was charged with actual violence. For Vincent Jr., it was his first arrest, a rarity for someone with his last name. Many of his co-defendants denied wrongdoing, but it was clear that the weight of his father's criminal empire still loomed over him. Facing charges of enterprise corruption and promoting gambling, Basciano Jr. was lucky to catch a break in court. Instead of a full 3-year sentence, Manhattan Federal Court Judge Richard Sullivan handed him 2 years in prison plus 1 year of home confinement. Why the leniency? Well, his 5-year-old son has special needs, and the judge believed the boy needed his father at home. Stephen got 3.5 years, Joseph got 6 months. Meanwhile, their father continues serving a life sentence in Colorado's Supermax prison, convicted of multiple murders. With a nickname like Paulie Roast Beef, you'd think this guy was running an Italian deli rather than working as a Lucchese soldier. But Cassano was deep in the Bronx faction, playing a key role in the family's violent and criminal activities. In 2012, he and another Lucchese soldier, Vincent Bruno, were assigned a hit job after a group of Bonanno associates formed a Lucchese social club and disrespected underboss Stephen Crea Sr. Crea Sr. wasn't the kind of guy to let that slide, so he ordered his son, Capo Stephen Crea Jr., to have the Bonanno associate killed. The hit order trickled down to Cassano and Bruno, who went after their target in the Bronx. But they failed, the Bonanno associate survived, and the dispute was later settled without further bloodshed. Years later, in 2017, the law caught up with Cassano. He was hit with racketeering, attempted murder, drug trafficking, and firearms charges, but he took a plea deal. He admitted to attempted assault in aid of racketeering and was sentenced to 18 months in prison, a relatively short stint for someone tied to a botched mafia hit. Cassano walked out of prison a free man on September 20th, 2018, but whether he truly left the game, that's anyone's guess. Connections are everything in the mafia, and Joseph Little Joe DiBenedetto had some serious ones. He married into the family. His father-in-law was none other than Lucchese boss Vic Camuso, one of the most feared mob leaders of his time. Being a Brooklyn soldier, DiBenedetto was involved in loan sharking, union corruption, and construction racketeering. Over the years, he racked up multiple indictments. One of the big reveals during his trial: both DiBenedetto and Vic Camuso had hidden interests in Di Fama Concrete, a company tied to Lucchese associate Joseph Fama. In typical mob fashion, they were pulling big money from the construction industry while keeping their names off the books. After serving his prison time, DiBenedetto was released on October 28, 2008, but by 2017 he was back in the thick of Lucchese family politics. Government witness John Penisi revealed that DiBenedetto was caught in the middle of a power struggle. Brooklyn members were fighting for control of the family, and Penisi was tasked with delivering messages to Camuso about who should take over. But DiBenedetto, he was fed up with all the power plays and the constant calls from Lucchese members wanting to make their moves. For a guy who married into the royal family of crime, he sure had a lot of headaches. Joseph Lubrano, aka Joey Relay, had a reputation in the Bronx underworld, but his criminal journey took some unexpected turns. Back in 1994, he was wrongfully convicted for beating a black police officer. The case was tied to the Tanglewood Boys, a Lucchese-affiliated gang that groomed young recruits for the mafia. But one of their members, Darren Mazzarella, flipped and told prosecutors that Lubrano wasn't actually part of Tanglewood and didn't participate in the attack. Despite this, Lubrano spent 2 years in prison before being released, but instead of keeping his hands clean, he went deeper into Lucchese operations, becoming a capo in the Arthur Avenue crew. In 2010, the FBI listed him on a wanted poster for armed robbery and racketeering. He was accused of running an illegal buckmaking operation, committing armed robberies across New York City, and leading a Bronx-based criminal crew. His run ended on September 11, 2010, when the feds arrested him at his girlfriend's home in Yonkers. He was convicted and sentenced to 57 months in federal prison, finally being released on October 31, 2014. But the story didn't end there. In 2016, government informant Anthony Zoccolillo dropped a bombshell. Lubrano had partnered with Stephen Crea Jr. in a Bronx gambling club back in 2001. Both Lubrano and Crea Jr. started out in the Tanglewood Boys, making them longtime mafia allies. And if you thought mob ties were just for the men, you are wrong. In March 2024, Lubrano's 31-year-old daughter, Amanda Lubrano, was sentenced to 22 months in prison for selling a kilogram of cocaine to an undercover agent. Looks like the family business isn't dying anytime soon. Ivan Archibaldo Guzman Salazar was born into infamous Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman and his first wife, Alejandrina Salazar Hernandez. Through his mother, he has two half-siblings, Raul and Ana Elizabeth Ramirez Salazar. Ivan with his brother Jesus, along with their half-brother Ovidio Guzman Lopez, were brought into the Sinaloa cartel as teenagers by their father and Zambada Garcia. In April 2004, Ivan Archibaldo was involved in the murder of Canadian exchange student Kristen Dale and her Mexican companion, Cesar Augusto Pulido Mendoza. The case did not reach a legal conclusion. In February 2005, municipal police officers in Zapopan arrested Ivan as he sat in a vehicle waiting for associates. Before their arrest, police had observed a man being thrown from a moving car. The officers pursued the vehicle and eventually detained 5 individuals, later identified as associates of Guzman Salazar. In early June 2005, Joaquin Guzman, still a fugitive, posted his son's $55,000 bail bond, securing his release. However, federal police quickly rearrested him. He was placed in Federal Social Readaptation Center No. 1 La Palma while awaiting trial on money laundering charges.
Sino también los recursos materiales e humanos de la estructura de los Chapitos. Si estamos hablando de un hombre.
Ivan struggled with the cold conditions in prison and requested his father to send warmer clothing. When Chapo attempted to smuggle contraband clothing into the facility, corrupt prison guards significantly increased their demands for bribes. Reportedly angered by this, Guzman later had the guards kidnapped, tortured, and murdered, leaving their dismembered remains near Mexico City International Airport. In 2008, Ivan was found guilty of money laundering once again and sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, he successfully appealed the verdict and was released later the same year. But what do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and explore more untold stories from the criminal underworld. Hit subscribe and stay connected. Power never truly fades.